Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll. Have some wine, the March Hare said in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine, she remarked. There isn't any, said the March Hare. Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it, was it? Said Alice angrily. It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare. I did not know it was your table, said Alice. It's laid for a great many more than 3. Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. You should learn not to make personal remarks. Alice said with some severity, it's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on this, and hearing this all, he said, why is a raven like a writing desk? Come, we shall have some fun now, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun asking riddles. I believe I can guess at that, she added aloud. Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it, said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean, the March Hare went on. I do, Alice hastily replied. At least I mean what I say. It's the same thing, you know. Not a bit the same, said the Hatter. Why, you must just as well be saying, I see what I eat. Is that the same as I eat what I see? Might as well just say, added the March Hare, that I like what I get, the same as I get what I like. You might as well say, said the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same as I sleep when I breathe. It's the same thing with you, said the Hatter. And here the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which was not much at all. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. What day of the month is it? He said, turning to Alice. He had his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it now and then and holding it to his ears. Alice considered and said, it's the 4th. 2 days wrong, said the Hatter. I told you. Butter wouldn't suit the works, he added, looking angrily at the March Hare. It was the best butter, the March Hare meekly replied. Yes, but some crumbs have gotten into it as well. The Hatter grumbled. You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife. The March Hare took the watch and looked at it gloomily, then he dipped it into his cup of tea and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark. It's the best butter, you know. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. What a funny watch, it tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is. Why shouldn't it? Does your watch tell you what year it is? Of course not, said Alice very readily. That's because it stays the same year for such a long time. Which is just the case with mine. Alice felt dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to her to have no sort of meaning in it whatsoever, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said politely as she could. The Dormouse was asleep again. He poured some more hot tea upon his nose. The Dormouse shook its head impatiently and said without opening its eyes, of course, just what I was going to remark to myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said to Ringmouse, no, I gave it up. What's the answer? I have not the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor do I, said the March Hare. Alice sighed really. I think you might do something better with the time than wasting it as riddles with no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter. You want to talk about wasting it. It's him. I do not know what you mean. Of course you don't, said the Hatter, tossing his head contemptuously. I dare you say you never spoke to time. Perhaps not, but I know I have to beat it when I learn music. Ah, that accounts for it. You won't stand beating now. If you could only keep on good terms with it, you must do anything you liked. With the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin lessons, and you have to begin, whisper a hint of time, and you round the clock it goes, twinkling 1:30 in time for dinner. I only wish it was, said the March Hare to itself in a whisper. That would be grand. Certainly, said Alice, but then I shouldn't be hungry, you know. Not at first, but you could keep it 1:30 as long as you like. Is that the way you manage? The Hatter shook his head mournfully. Not I. We quarrelled last March just before he went mad, you know. It was the great concert part given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing, Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. You know the song, perhaps? I've heard something like it. It goes on, you know. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the Dormouse shook itself and began singing in its sleep, Twinkle, 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 and went so long he had to pinch itself to make it stop. Well, I had hardly finished the first verse, and the Hatter felt dreadfully savage. answered the Hatter.